History is often written by the victors, but in the ancient Near East it was written in blood. We think of these stories as moral fables, but for the men standing in the dust of the Levant 3,000 years ago, there was nothing moral about the weight of a bronze axe or the smell of a city burning. The Old Testament records a series of conflicts so brutal, so tactically complex, that they still baffle military historians today. From the collapse of Jericho's impossible walls to David's tactical mastery over the Philistine war machine, these aren't just stories. They are the chronicles of survival in a world that showed no mercy. Tonight we go beyond the page. We step into the smoke. These are the 5 most brutal battles of the Old Testament. The world we are talking about was a mess. Imagine a time when entire civilizations just disappeared. That was the Bronze Age collapse, a period around 1200 BC when empires crumbled, trade routes vanished, and chaos reigned. Suddenly, the Levant, a narrow strip of land connecting 3 continents, became the most dangerous place on Earth. It was a crossroads, a prize, and a war zone. Everyone wanted a piece of it, and they were willing to kill for it. In this brutal landscape, a new concept emerged: Herem, total destruction. Not just defeating an enemy, but wiping them out. Every man, woman, child, and animal, every building burned, every artifact shattered. It was a terrifying strategy designed to instill absolute fear and prevent any future resistance. This wasn't about conquest, it was about eradication. Jericho was the gateway, an oasis city protected by double-walled fortifications that had stood for centuries. To the Israelites, it was an immovable object. The outer wall was about 12 feet high and 6 feet thick, built on a stone retaining wall 15 feet tall. Inside that, after a 25-foot gap, was another wall, equally thick and even taller. Getting through that was almost impossible with the technology of the time, but the strategy used here was not a siege in the traditional sense. It was a psychological breakdown. For 6 days, a silent army circled the city, no war cries, no drums, just the rhythmic tramping of sandals and the haunting, discordant blast of rams' horns. Imagine being a sentry on those walls, looking down at a silent mass of people moving like a ghost in the desert heat, day after day. The tension would have been unbearable. Every sunset brought another night of fear. Every sunrise another day of this strange, silent parade. By the 7th day, the city was a powder keg of nerves. The defenders were already broken, their minds worn down by the relentless, silent pressure. When the silence finally broke with a unified shout, it wasn't just the walls that fell, it was the very will of the defenders. The archaeological evidence suggests that a massive earthquake might have caused the walls to collapse outwards, creating ramps for the attackers. But for those inside, it felt like the world was ending. The sudden, violent transition from silence to total war would have been overwhelming. What followed was a total Herem, a complete destruction. Every stone, every soul consumed by fire. The city was left a smoking ruin, a stark monument to a new kind of warfare that aimed not just to win but to obliterate. Jericho was the first lesson in the brutality of this new age. Victory at Jericho led to arrogance at Ai. The first assault was a disaster, 36 men dead, an army in retreat. This small defeat was a shock. The Israelites had just seen God bring down the walls of Jericho, and now they were beaten by a much smaller city. It showed them that even with divine help, overconfidence could be deadly. They had underestimated the enemy and paid a price in blood. This humiliation forced them to rethink their approach, to learn from their mistakes, and to understand that even small forces could be dangerous if not treated with respect. But the second attempt at Ai was a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. Joshua divided his forces. He sent a small group, about 5,000 men, to lure the king of Ai out of his gates, feigning another retreat. This was a classic military tactic: pretend to be weak, draw the enemy into a false sense of security, and then strike when they least expect it. As the main body of Ai's defenders emptied the city in pursuit of this small, seemingly fleeing group, they left their city vulnerable. The king of Ai, emboldened by his previous victory, saw an easy win. He probably thought the Israelites were a broken force, easily routed. He couldn't have been more wrong. While the main force of Ai chased the decoy, 30 Ornton elite soldiers, who had been hidden in an ambush position behind the city all night, rose from the shadows. These men were fresh, well-rested, and ready to strike. They moved swiftly and silently, entering the now undefended city. In minutes, the unbeatable city was a funeral pyre. Smoke began to curl into the sky, a terrifying signal to the pursuing Ai forces. The defenders turned back to see their homes in flames, caught between two blades. The small force they had been chasing now turned to face them, and the hidden ambush force was pouring out of their burning city. It was a pincer movement, perfectly executed. The battle became a slaughter. There were no survivors from Ai. The king of Ai was captured and executed, his body displayed as a warning. His city was turned into a heap of ruins, a literal mound of rubble and ash, a warning to all who stood in the path of the conquest. This wasn't just a victory, it was a psychological blow to the entire region. It showed that the Israelites were not only powerful, but also cunning, capable of sophisticated military strategy. They learned from their initial failure at Ai and turned it into a devastating triumph. The lesson was clear. Underestimate them at your peril. The Midianite coalition was a sea of tents 135 Wowzaran strong. Imagine looking out and seeing an endless expanse of canvas, stretching across the valley, filled with warriors and their camels. It was an overwhelming display of power, a force that dwarfed any local army. Gideon had 30,000 men, but he chose only 300. Why? Because he didn't want a battle. He wanted a massacre. This wasn't about conventional warfare, it was about psychological shock and chaos. He needed men who were alert, disciplined, and ready to act on instinct. The way he chose them was unusual. He led his men to water and watched how they drank. Those who knelt down and put their faces in the water were dismissed. They were too relaxed, too vulnerable. But those who lapped the water from their hands, staying vigilant, heads up, aware of their surroundings, those were the men he kept. They were the ones who remained alert even in a moment of basic need. This selection process, seemingly arbitrary, was designed to find the most disciplined and aware soldiers, men who could be relied upon in a high-stakes, chaotic situation. This was a midnight raid. Gideon's men didn't carry swords in their hands. They carried torches hidden inside clay jars. Each man also had a trumpet. They surrounded the vast Midianite camp under the cover of darkness. At the signal, simultaneously, they smashed the jars, revealing the bright torches. 300 lights flared in the pitch black. At the same moment, 300 trumpets screamed, a sudden, deafening blast of noise. In the disorientation of the night, the Midianites believed they were being swarmed by an immense force. They woke up to sudden light, deafening noise and shadows everywhere. Panic turned into fratricide. In the darkness, unable to tell friend from foe, the Midianites began slaughtering their own allies. By sunrise, a superpower had vanished, defeated by light, noise, and sheer terror. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a victory achieved not by brute force, but by exploiting fear and confusion. Hazor was the head of all those kingdoms, the largest city in the region, a Bronze Age metropolis that commanded immense power and resources. King Jabin led a formidable coalition of northern kings, and their military might was anchored by a terrifying technological advantage: iron-rimmed chariots. These were the tanks of the ancient world, capable of breaking enemy lines and wreaking havoc on foot soldiers. But Joshua moved with a speed and tactical brilliance the ancient world hadn't seen before. He understood the terrain and the limitations of even the most advanced weaponry. He struck them at the waters of Merom before they could deploy their chariots effectively on open ground. The strategy was simple, yet devastating. Engage them where their advantage was neutralized. He ambushed them in marshy, uneven territory where the heavy chariots would bog down, becoming easy targets. He didn't just defeat them, he systematically dismantled their war machine. He hamstrung their horses, rendering them useless, and burned their chariots in the field, turning their most potent weapon into scrap. But the real brutality was saved for the city itself. Archaeologists today still find the Hazor burn layer, a massive stratum of ash and scorched earth, feet thick, a testament to the ferocity of the destruction. Joshua didn't just conquer Hazor, he erased its power from the earth, leaving behind a smoldering ruin as a stark message for any who dared to challenge him. David is often remembered for a single iconic act, defeating Goliath with a sling and a stone, but his true brutality and tactical genius lay in his years as a mercenary leader, a period often overlooked. He faced the Philistines, a powerful, seafaring people who possessed superior iron technology. While the Israelites were still largely in the Bronze Age, the Philistines had access to iron weapons and tools, giving them a significant military edge. David quickly realized he couldn't beat them in a fair, pitched battle on their terms, so he never gave them one. Instead, David mastered the art of asymmetrical warfare and guerrilla tactics. From the valley of Rephaim to the heights of Gath, he utilized night marches, swift flanking maneuvers, and an intimate knowledge of the rugged terrain. He famously waited for the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, a signal that allowed him to anticipate and counter Philistine movements. He turned the Philistines' heavy armor and chariots against them, dragging them into mountainous rocky terrain, where their chariots were useless and their heavy armor became a liability. He didn't just kill giants, he systematically dismantled an empire piece by piece, sword by sword, using cunning and agility over brute force. His campaigns were a relentless series of raids and ambushes that slowly chipped away at Philistine dominance, securing Israel's future. These 5 battles weren't just isolated incidents or simple narratives from a religious text. They were pivotal turning points in human history, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. They remind us that the ancient world was a place of impossible stakes, where survival often hinged on terrifying brilliance and ruthless execution. The archaeological evidence supports the accounts of these brutal conflicts. Across modern-day Israel, excavators have uncovered distinct ash layers in the ruins of many ancient cities, including Hazor and Jericho. These layers, often several feet thick, are not just traces of ordinary fires. They are the undeniable proof of widespread, intense destruction, consistent with the biblical descriptions of widespread burning and conquest. These aren't just stories. They are etched into the very soil. If you want to see the real history of the Bible, look past the simplified parables and into the dust, the ash, and the broken walls, because that is where the truth is buried. It's a truth of strategic genius, psychological warfare, and an unyielding will to survive. Which of these commanders, Joshua, Gideon, or David, would you fear most if you stood on the opposing side? Which battle do you want us to deep dive into next, exploring the tactics and the terror in even greater detail? Let us know your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below.